Call the ambulance, now! Betty screamed, her voice cracking through the marble halls of Marland Mansion. Jennifer's not breathing. Oh, Lord, her lips are turning blue. The sound of Gordon Nicholson's footsteps thundered down the grand staircase. The billionaire, usually composed, always in control, was barefoot, shirt half-buttoned, his face as pale as the porcelain floor beneath him. "What happened?" he shouted, nearly slipping as he reached Betty's trembling hands. Betty didn't answer. Her focus was fixed on the baby in her arms. Little Jennifer, just 6 months old, was limp and colorless, her tiny chest rising in shallow, broken gasps. The world blurred around Betty. All she could hear was the faint ticking of the ornate grandfather clock, the cruel sound of seconds racing against her faith. She stopped," Betty cried, her eyes wide with terror. "I laid her down for her nap. She was fine, Gordon. She was fine." Gordon's voice broke into a whisper. "How long?" "Maybe 2 minutes? No, 3. God help me. We're running out of time." Jennifer's little arm fell limp against Betty's wrist. A chill tore through her chest. Without thinking, she pressed her lips to the baby's mouth, breathing for her, tears streaking down her cheeks. "Don't you quit on me, baby girl. Come on, Jennifer. You fight now. You fight." Gordon stumbled backward, clutching his head. She's dying, Betty. She's dying." "No, she's not," Betty snapped back, her voice a guttural cry of defiance. "Not on my watch. Not in my hands." She began chest compressions, her trembling hands pushing rhythmically against Jennifer's tiny chest. "Come on," she whispered. "You've got breath in you. You've got life in you. Your mama's watching from heaven, baby girl. I know she is." The clock struck again. Another minute gone. Gordon collapsed into a chair, burying his face in his palms. "Please, God, don't take her. She's all I've got left." And just as the last flicker of light in Jennifer's eyes dimmed, Betty froze. A faint gasp, a small, sharp intake of air. Then another. Her head snapped up, tears welling in her eyes. "She's breathing." Gordon's head shot up, disbelief spreading across his face. "What?" "She's breathing," Betty cried again, clutching Jennifer to her chest. "Thank you, Jesus. She's breathing." The billionaire fell to his knees, reaching out a trembling hand toward the woman who just brought his daughter back from the edge of death. But as the sirens wailed in the distance, Betty's tears turned from relief to dread, because she knew what she had done to save that child would soon cost her everything. Welcome back, family. If you're settled in and ready for this journey, subscribe now and tell me in the comments, where in the world are you watching from? Because tomorrow, I've got another incredible story waiting for you. Trust me, you don't want to miss what's coming. Now, let's begin. 3 months earlier, before that night of blue lips and sirens, Betty Mahoney arrived at Marland Mansion under the blazing Oklahoma sun. The mansion stood like something out of history, red brick grandeur surrounded by manicured gardens that whispered wealth. Betty adjusted her nurse's cap as she stepped out of the cab, her stomach churning with nerves. She'd worked at OU Health, University of Oklahoma Medical Center, for nearly 20 years. 20 years of holding hands through heartbreak, of saving lives that sometimes didn't want to be saved. But this job, this was different. She wasn't walking into a hospital room. She was walking into a billionaire's world. When Gordon opened the front door, she almost didn't recognize him from the newspapers. The photos online showed a man of power, the smiling oil magnate turned philanthropist whose empire stretched from Tulsa to Texas. But the man who greeted her looked nothing like that. His eyes were hollow, his shoulders slumped, his tie hung loose around his neck. "Mrs. Mahoney," he said quietly, his voice raw. "Thank you for coming." "Please, just call me Betty," she replied, offering a warm smile that softened the air between them. "And I'm sorry again for your loss, Mr. Nicholson." He nodded faintly. "Just Gordon," he corrected. "Please, Gordon." The loss they were speaking of was still fresh. Lydia Nicholson, Gordon's wife, had passed away 2 weeks earlier after a sudden stroke. She was only 34. Her funeral had drawn national attention, but no amount of condolences could fill the void she left behind. Not for Gordon, not for their newborn daughter, Jennifer. Betty had been Lydia's nurse during her final moments. When the hospital reached out and said the Nicholsons needed someone to care for the baby, Betty didn't hesitate. She'd promised Lydia, as the machines beeped and the monitors flatlined, that she'd look after her baby girl. Now, standing inside the mansion's marble foyer, she could feel Lydia's absence in the air. The nursery upstairs was painted soft pink, with golden stars scattered across the ceiling. A photo of Lydia holding baby Jennifer sat on the nightstand, the smile frozen in time. Betty's chest tightened as she looked at it. She was beautiful, Betty whispered. Gordon stood in the doorway, watching her. She was everything, he said simply. In the weeks that followed, Betty settled into the household. Every morning, she'd hum gospel songs while making Jennifer's bottles, her warm alto voice filling the halls. Every evening, she'd walk the baby through the gardens, whispering prayers into the Oklahoma wind. Gordon, though, remained distant. He spent most nights in his study, glass of bourbon in hand, staring at spreadsheets he never read. He was a man broken in half alive, half ghost. Sometimes she would see him standing outside Jennifer's nursery at night, just watching, his eyes glassy and unreadable. One night she gently placed a hand on his arm. "She can hold her, you know," she said softly. "She won't break." He didn't look at her. "I'm afraid if I do, I'll fall apart." Betty's heart ached. She knew that fear. She'd lost her husband 15 years earlier, a truck accident on I-35. Her 2 sons were grown now, both serving in the military. But the ache of losing her own family never truly faded. Maybe that's why she bonded so deeply with Jennifer. The baby's laughter, the little hand that gripped her finger, it was healing. For both of them. Still, the mansion had an emptiness to it, the kind of silence that settled deep in your bones. Then came that night, the one that ripped through their fragile peace like a storm. Jennifer had been teething, restless. Betty had stayed up with her for hours, humming old soul hymns to calm her. Gordon had gone to bed early, the first night he'd tried to rest without the aid of sleeping pills. And then, just past midnight, the silence turned to horror. Jennifer stopped breathing, and everything Betty had promised Lydia, everything she'd built her life around, was suddenly on the line. Sometimes the people who hold a family together aren't the ones with power, they're the ones who show up when no one else does. If you've ever had someone like Betty in your life, someone who gave more than they had, don't just scroll by. Honor them. Tell me about them below.
The sun hadn't yet risen over Ponca City when the ambulance lights faded into the distance. The house was silent again, but the air still trembled with what had just happened. Jennifer had survived. Against all odds, her heartbeat was steady. The ER doctor at OU Health, University of Oklahoma Medical Center, called it a miracle. "Quick hands and quicker thinking," he said, commending Betty Mahoney's CPR. But to Betty, the word miracle didn't feel right. She sat alone in the hospital's waiting area, still wearing her nurse's scrubs, her hand shaking as she held Jennifer's pink baby blanket to her chest. Her mind replayed every second. The blue lips, the panic, the prayer. She'd been a nurse long enough to know how close they came to losing that child. She wasn't supposed to be this attached, but she was. The elevator dinged and Gordon Nicholson stepped out. He looked exhausted, his eyes bloodshot, his voice reft from yelling and crying. "Betty," he said quietly, approaching her. She stood immediately. "How's Jennifer?" He exhaled shakily, running a hand through his graying hair. "They said she's stable. They're keeping her overnight for observation." Betty closed her eyes in relief. "Thank you, Lord." There was a long silence between them, the kind that holds too much to say. Finally, Gordon spoke again. "You saved her life, Betty. I don't even know how to thank you." "You don't have to," she said softly. "She's my baby too. At least, that's how I see her." His throat tightened. He didn't know how to respond to that, the honesty in her words, the depth of her heart. Then something shifted in his gaze. His gratitude darkened into something else, confusion, maybe even suspicion. "I have to ask," he said hesitantly. "How did this happen? How could you not have seen the signs sooner?" Betty blinked, stunned. "Sir?" "I'm not blaming you," Gordon said quickly, but his tone was uneven. I need to understand. My daughter almost died tonight. You were supposed to be watching her." The words hit like a slap. Betty's jaw tightened. "I was watching her. I never took my eyes off her. I checked her breathing just 5 minutes before it happened." "Then how?" He pressed, his voice rising with grief and fear disguised as anger. "How does a healthy baby just stop breathing?" Her lips trembled. "Sometimes it happens. Gordon, sometimes babies just—" She stopped, catching herself. "But I was there. I did what I had to do." He stared at her for a long moment, his chest heaving. Then, quietly, he said, "I believe you." But Betty could tell. Something in his tone said he didn't, not entirely. Hours later, back at Marlin Mansion, Betty sat on the edge of her small guest room bed. She could hear Gordon's muffled voice down the hall as he spoke on the phone. To his lawyers, to the hospital, to anyone who could make sense of the chaos. When she finally dozed off, she dreamed of Lydia, standing by the nursery window, cradling Jennifer and whispering, "Take care of her, Betty. Promise me." She woke up with tears on her cheeks and a heaviness in her chest. Down the hall, Gordon sat in his study with a glass of bourbon, staring into the fire. He wanted to believe Betty. He really did. But the fear that something or someone had caused his daughter's collapse was eating him alive. That night had changed everything. And deep down, Gordon knew this wasn't over. When fear takes over love, even good people say things they don't mean. If you've ever hurt someone who is only trying to help, make it right while you still can. Don't wait until tomorrow to say thank you. 2 days after the incident, Marlin Mansion no longer felt like a home. The once bustling halls were quiet except for the faint hum of air vents and the occasional creak of the wooden floors. Betty Mahoney moved carefully through the house, her polished shoes clicking softly as she carried baby Jennifer down the grand hallway, toward the nursery. The air smelled of furniture polish and old money, sharp, clean, and cold. Jennifer cooed softly in her arms, her color back to normal, her tiny fingers grasping Betty's necklace. Betty smiled down at her. "That's right, sweetheart. You gave us quite the scare." She sat in the nursery rocking chair, humming "His Eyes on the Sparrow." It was the same hymn she used to sing to her sons when they were babies, when the nights in Oklahoma City were long and rent money was tight. For a few moments, everything felt right again. Until she noticed the shadow in the doorway. Beautiful voice, a woman's tone, smooth but edged. Betty looked up to see Victoria Nichols, the mansion's housekeeper. A tall, thin woman with sharp eyes and a polished southern drawl. She had been with the Nicholsons for nearly 15 years. Unlike Betty, she wasn't hired for compassion. She was hired for loyalty. To Gordon and to no one else. "Thank you," Betty said, her tone polite. "Word around here travels fast. Quite the hero you are, Mrs. Mahoney, saving the little one's life." "I was just doing my job." "That's what they all say. Funny, though. Before you showed up, nothing ever went wrong in this house. Not with Mrs. Nicholson, not with the baby. Everything ran smooth as butter. Then suddenly, the new nurse comes in and tragedy strikes. Twice." Betty froze. "Excuse me?" Victoria's gaze was steady. "Don't play dumb. The master might trust you, but I see how things happen around here. I'd watch myself if I were you." Before Betty could respond, the sound of footsteps echoed from down the hall. Gordon Nicholson appeared, his phone in one hand, his expression tight. "Victoria, a word, please," he said sharply. "Yes, sir." She straightened. Gordon glanced at Betty and the baby before leading Victoria away. Betty watched their silhouettes disappear down the corridor, and though she couldn't hear the words, She could feel the tension pulsing like static. That evening, Betty stood outside on the back patio, staring out over the sweeping lawns. The Oklahoma wind rustled the trees and carried the smell of rain. Her mind replayed Victoria's words again and again. Was it just bitterness, or was there something deeper behind it? Mrs. Mahoney? She turned. Gordon was standing behind her, his face softer now. You didn't eat dinner, he said quietly. I wasn't hungry, she replied. He nodded slowly, stepping closer. I owe you another apology. I shouldn't have questioned you at the hospital. I was scared. I took it out on you. Betty met his gaze. You were scared for your daughter, Mr. Nicholson. I understand. Gordon, he corrected, offering a faint smile. Please. For the first time since Lydia's death, there was warmth in his voice. The wall between them cracked just a little. I'm just glad Jennifer is safe, Betty said. He nodded. You've done more for her than I could ever repay. Betty hesitated. You don't need to repay me. Just don't let the wrong people make you doubt what's right.
His brow furrowed. What do you mean? Nothing, she said quickly. Forget I said it. But Gordon didn't forget. Neither did Betty. Because that night, when she walked back into the nursery, she found something chilling. Jennifer's monitor, the one that tracked her breathing and heart rate, had been unplugged. And Betty was sure she hadn't done it. Have you ever trusted someone completely until one small thing made you doubt everything? What did you do when that moment came? Rain lashed against the windows of Marlin Mansion that night, streaking down the glass like tears. The storm outside was nothing compared to the one brewing within. Betty Mahoney sat at the kitchen counter, a mug of coffee going cold in her hands. The unplugged monitor haunted her mind. Every nurse instinct screamed that it hadn't been an accident. She'd rechecked it twice, once before putting Jennifer down for her nap, again right before Gordon came in. It was working then. Someone had tampered with it afterward. And there were only 3 people who could have entered that room: herself, Gordon, or Victoria. Betty's hands trembled slightly as she sipped her coffee. Her phone buzzed on the counter. A text. From an unknown number. You should have left when you had the chance. Her breath caught. She looked around the kitchen, the stainless steel appliances gleaming, the digital clock ticking past midnight. Her pulse raced. She grabbed her phone, typing back with shaking fingers. Who is this? What do you want? No response. Moments later, the lights flickered. Thunder cracked overhead. Jennifer began crying upstairs, loud, desperate wails that pierced through the storm. Her heart lurched as she sprinted up the grand staircase. The nursery door was cracked open. Inside, Gordon was standing over the crib, his hands gripping the railing, his face pale in the dim light. Gordon? She whispered. What are you doing in here? He didn't turn. I heard her cry. I came to check. Betty approached cautiously. Jennifer was safe, still crying but unharmed. The monitor light blinked again, plugged back in. Who unplugged that monitor earlier? She asked quietly. Gordon's jaw tightened. What are you talking about? Don't play dumb, she said. Someone wants this baby hurt, or worse. He turned sharply toward her. Are you accusing me? No, sir, I'm not. Her voice steadied, low and firm. I've been doing this job for 20 years. I know an accident from a setup. Someone in this house doesn't want Jennifer to live. He stepped closer, eyes blazing. Are you accusing me? I'm saying you're blind to what's happening right under your nose. The words hung in the air like thunder. For a long moment, the only sound was Jennifer's sobs.
Then, lightning flashed, illuminating something on the wall behind him. Betty's gaze sharpened. Gordon? What is that? He turned. A framed photo of Lydia Nicholson and baby Jennifer hung slightly askew. But it wasn't the photo itself that made Betty's blood run cold. It was the faint reflection in the glass. Someone was standing in the hallway. She turned, heart pounding, but whoever it was had already disappeared into the shadows. The next morning, Betty found Victoria in the laundry room, folding sheets with meticulous precision. "You told him I tried to hurt that baby," Betty said flatly. Victoria didn't even flinch. "You shouldn't have come here. People like you don't last long in places like this." Betty's eyes narrowed. "People like me?" Victoria's smile was razor-thin. "You know exactly what I mean." There was venom under her sweetness, the kind that hid behind polite society and Southern manners. Betty turned to leave, but Victoria's voice stopped her cold. Lydia trusted the wrong people too, and look where that got her. Betty froze. "What do you mean by that?" Victoria said nothing, just went back to folding sheets, humming under her breath. But Betty's mind was spinning. Lydia's death, sudden, unexpected, had always bothered her. Now she couldn't shake the feeling it wasn't just a stroke. There were too many coincidences, too many secrets buried inside these walls. And now, it wasn't just Jennifer's life on the line. It was her own. Sometimes the truth doesn't just hurt, it isolates. If you've ever been falsely accused or had your good deeds twisted into something dark, you know how it feels to stand alone. Don't just watch. Stand with those who've been misunderstood, because one voice of belief can change everything. The morning after her confrontation with Victoria, Betty Mahoney woke to the sound of voices echoing through the marble halls of Marlin Mansion. She pulled on her robe and stepped out into the corridor. From the top of the staircase, she could see Gordon Nicholson standing in the foyer, his face tight, his voice low but sharp. Beside him were two men in suits, lawyers judging by the briefcases and clipped tones. "I don't care what it costs," Gordon was saying. "I want everything rechecked, the monitor, the staff logs, the security feeds. If there's even a chance Jennifer's life is still in danger, I need to know." One of the men nodded. "Of course, sir, but that means we'll have to question everyone, even Ms. Mahoney." Gordon hesitated. "Do it." The words hit Betty like a slap. She retreated to her room, closing the door quietly. Her heart pounded. He's having me investigated. It wasn't fear that crushed her. It was heartbreak. She had poured her soul into caring for that child. She had prayed over her crib, sung her to sleep, and begged God to keep her safe. And now the man whose daughter she had saved thought she might be a threat. Betty sat on the edge of her bed, staring at her reflection in the vanity mirror. "Lord," she whispered, "why did you bring me here if it was just to break me?" Tears welled in her eyes, spilling silently down her cheeks. A knock broke the silence. She quickly wiped her face. "Come in." The door opened, and there stood Gordon, his expression unreadable, his voice low but sharp. "We need to talk." She stood, folding her hands in front of her. "If this is about those men—" "It is." He exhaled deeply. "I had to let them do their jobs, Betty. Jennifer is all I have left." Her voice shook. "And you think I'd harm her?" "No," he said quickly. "I don't want to believe that. But someone's lying to me. I need the truth no matter what it costs." The room filled with silence. Outside, Thunder rolled over Ponca City.
Betty took a slow breath. Then you'd better start looking closer at the people who've been here longer than me. He frowned. Meaning? Meaning your housekeeper's been whispering poison in your ear since the day I arrived, she said firmly. She knows something about Lydia's death, Gordon. I heard her say it. He stiffened. You're saying Victoria? I'm saying your wife didn't die the way they told you she did. Gordon's face paled. That's a serious accusation. I know, Betty replied softly. But I saw the medical reports. Lydia's chart from OU Health. There were traces of a sedative in her blood, one that wasn't prescribed. I didn't think much of it at the time, but now? Her voice trembled. Now I think someone wanted her gone before you could find out. Gordon's eyes went wide, his mind spinning. You're telling me. I'm telling you Lydia didn't just die, Betty said. She was helped along. The words hung in the air, heavy and terrible. Gordon turned away, pressing his palm against the window. Rain streaked down the glass like tears. If that's true, then everything I've believed for the last 6 months has been a lie. Behind him, Betty's phone buzzed. Another unknown text lit up the screen. Stop digging, or the baby dies next time. She froze, her heart slamming in her chest. Betty, Gordon turned, seeing the look on her face. What is it? She handed him the phone. He read the message and went completely still. The truth hit them both at once. This wasn't just about Lydia's death. Someone inside this house was ready to kill again. There's a moment in every story where doing the right thing could cost you everything. If you've ever stood at that crossroads, heart pounding, faith trembling, you know what courage really is. Don't just watch people like Betty fight alone. Be the kind of person who stands beside them. The storm rolled through the night like a living thing. Thunder cracked over Ponca City, shaking the windows of Marlin Mansion as if heaven itself were bearing witness. Betty Maloney didn't sleep. She sat in the nursery beside Jennifer's crib, her Bible open on her lap. The baby's tiny breaths steadied her heartbeat, anchoring her in the middle of fear. She whispered a prayer under her breath, half plea, half promise. Lord, if I can't save myself, at least let me save her. Downstairs, a floorboard creaked. She froze. The house was supposed to be empty. Gordon had driven to Tulsa hours earlier to meet with investigators. Victoria was off for the night. But the noise came again. Slow, heavy, deliberate. Betty rose silently, her nurse's instincts kicking in. She reached for the baby monitor. Its red light blinked steady. Then she slipped out of the nursery and into the dim hallway. The mansion's corridors stretched long and echoing, portraits of oil barons staring down from the walls. The air smelled faintly of rain and lemon polish. She followed the sound toward the study, Gordon's study, the one room that had been locked since Lydia's death. Now it was open. A light glowed under the door. She pushed it open just enough to see the back of someone moving near Gordon's desk. The figure was slender, tall, and unmistakably familiar. Victoria! Betty's heart pounded. Victoria was rifling through Gordon's desk drawers, pulling out papers and shoving them into a black folder. She moved fast, like she'd done it before. Betty stepped into the doorway. Looking for something? Victoria froze, her spine straightening like a struck match. Slowly she turned. Her eyes were sharp, cold. You shouldn't be in here. Neither should you. Victoria's smile was slow, snake-like. Oh, Betty, you just don't know when to quit, do you? What are you hiding? Victoria tilted her head. You want to play hero? Fine. But here's the truth you keep digging for. Lydia wasn't the saint everyone thought she was. She was leaving Gordon, taking the baby, taking half the estate. Betty frowned. That's no reason for her to die. Victoria's lip curled. It was reason enough for him. Betty's stomach dropped. What? Victoria took a step closer, her heels clicking on the hardwood floor.
You think your billionaire boss is some broken-hearted widower. Wake up. Lydia found out he was funneling company funds offshore. She was going to expose him. Then, poof, aneurysm. How convenient. Betty's heart hammered. You're lying. I am? Victoria held up a small flash drive, twirling it between her fingers. This is the proof. Lydia copied everything the night before she died, but Gordon never knew where she hid it. Betty's eyes widened. And you do? Victoria smirked. I do now, and when I sell it, I'll be far away from this miserable state before anyone figures out what really happened. Betty's voice trembled, but her resolve hardened. You'd risk a baby's life for money? Victoria's smile faded. That baby's the only thing tying Gordon's fortune to this house. Once she's gone, his entire inheritance transfers to the trust, and I control it. You do the math. Betty's stomach turned. Before she could speak, Victoria's eyes flicked to the doorway behind her. A low, familiar voice cut through the silence. Thank you, Gordon said coldly. That's exactly what I needed to hear. Victoria froze. He stepped into the light, rain dripping from his coat, eyes burning with betrayal. You just confessed to sabotaging my daughter's monitor and threatening her life. Victoria's face paled. Gordon, he snapped, save it. I trusted you with my home, my family. The flash drive trembled in her fingers. You don't understand. I understand perfectly. He stepped forward. You killed my wife. Have you ever faced a moment where someone finally saw the truth, even when no one believed you? Those moments restore faith in humanity. Hold on to them, because truth, no matter how long it hides, always comes to light.
After a while, Gordon stood and offered his hand. Come on, dinner's ready. Chef made peach cobbler, said it was your favorite. Betty laughed through her tears. That man's trying to bribe me into staying forever. Maybe I am too, Gordon said with a grin. As they walked back toward the house, the sun dipped behind the trees, turning the sky into a wash of pink and gold. Inside, the warmth of the mansion wrapped around them. The same walls that had once held fear now held laughter, love, and second chances. Later that night, after tucking Jennifer into bed, Betty stood by the nursery window, looking out over the moonlit gardens. The wind stirred the curtains, carrying the faint sound of crickets from the field. She whispered a quiet prayer, eyes glistening. Lydia, she's safe now. You can rest easy. Behind her, Gordon appeared in the doorway. Talking to her? Betty turned and smiled. Every night. He nodded softly. Me too. For a long moment, they stood in the hush of the nursery, the soft hum of the monitor steady and reassuring. Finally, Betty said, You know, Gordon, I think maybe the good Lord sent me here for more than one reason. Oh? He asked. She smiled. To remind you that miracles don't always come wrapped in money. Sometimes they wear scrubs and sing lullabies. Gordon chuckled quietly, the kind of laugh that sounds like healing. Then I'm lucky God sent you. Betty looked down at Jennifer's peaceful face and whispered, No, sir. We're all lucky he gave her back. There are people in this world who give everything, not for recognition, not for reward, but because love and faith live in their bones. If someone like Betty Mahoney ever crossed your path, a nurse, a caretaker, a friend who stayed when others left, don't let the moment pass. Say thank you. And if you believe that miracles still walk among us, subscribe, not for me, but to keep stories like this alive.